for those that are new and haven't been on before, give them a little background about who you are, what you're doing, where you came from.
Sure. Where I came from my parents. No.
Yeah.
They call me the error. I live in Connecticut now. I had a long corporate career. I'd say for 20 years, 12 of them at AIG, building operations and data departments, being a finance manager, being a technology manager, project leader, all kinds of stuff. A few years I worked at Prudential, and another year I worked at Ingersoll Rand, so I had some manufacturing experience. But in 2017, I had survived 10 quarterly rounds of layoffs, not round 11. So in 2017, I was laid off of AIG, and I had to find something new. So I stumbled upon this term called Bitcoin, and I had seen some commercial about it, and I looked at it, and I was like, "This is a database," and I had built databases all my life, and I'm like, I could figure out this is a new age of databases. What I didn't realize I was walking into was a war between boomers and millennials, a war between people and the banks, geopolitical crises, all kinds of like the media bashing and trashing crypto and saying Bitcoin's been dead several hundred times. I had no idea I was walking into that. And when I walked into the Wild West. There was no regulations whatsoever. And there's some today, but there was nothing. And, so I quickly got an entrepreneur's lesson in life, in the first year. I had a couple of heart attacks in the end of 2018 because the crypto winter was 2018. And that was a struggle. I lost my business. I lost my New York Jets tickets. I lost my bicycle that I had when I was 21. And a lot of things. But I said, I'm staying in the game. So I did. And I built a crypto portfolio, which is now in the tubes, down 80%, but everybody's is,
We're back. It wasn't last year.
Yeah, no, it's very worse now. But hey,
what is that? Real quick, touch on this a little bit, because somebody actually said to me the other day, one of my guest speakers called out because this happened to him, right? And he lost a lot. What is happening right now in the market with Bitcoin?
Well, it's the same with every market. Every market's in the tubes.
Yeah.
I don't think there's any market that's good right at the moment because of inflation, and other crises that are going on in the world, but when's it going to return? When's the bear market going to end? And when's the bull market going to start? No one knows, but as long as you're building for the future and not selling, if you don't sell, you don't lose, so, hey, you just keep going on. Right.
So talk to me real quick about, and I didn't mean to interrupt you earlier, but explain to me when you say you built this portfolio, what does that mean? Help put into perspective for what you've now built from, on your personal side, and then what you're doing with it now.
Sure. My personal side, I built a crypto portfolio, about 15 cryptos, and I've researched, tens of thousands of them. You just read all the documents, learn everything you possibly can. And one of the things that I learned, in the past year and a half, I've been a podcast host in crypto and blockchain, where I've interviewed founders, entrepreneurs, co-founders, executives across the world. And, in areas of the NFTs, metaverses, blockchain, decentralized finance, all the areas. And when I started, my podcasts are posted on the Irish Tech News. They had three countries that they really had predominant interest, where the audience was, and now that's 165. And I interviewed founders from 50 countries. So when I started, I said, I want to do it the right way, and that is, to build what I did at AIG, and because I built the AUM department, I built the global departments from scratch. So I had that background experience, and so far, I was able to do that. And then in the process, learn a whole bunch of stuff. And when you think you know one thing, and you think you know the same thing for 3 years, and then someone comes on your show and tells you something completely different, your mind is completely blown.
Totally. Totally. Okay, so I want to dive into a little bit about some of those things that have really been your aha moments as you've done this. But before we do, what really drove you to the podcast? Why'd you start?
the editor called me. He said, "I know you're not doing anything." You know, and that was right after my book Regeneration X came out, and I wanted to push that. And I learned that people don't really read intergenerational cultist kind of books. So I'm like, all right, and so it's right behind me, the yellow X over here, my shoulder. So I started interviewing people, and I had no background in podcasting. I had no background in speaking. And the thing is, I used to speak really fast, where no one could really understand me. And even like my mom and my brothers and my wife growing, they always told me that I talk too fast and they don't understand what I'm saying. And I had to learn how to get over all the speech issues I had, stuttering, slam, like all that stuff. I had it a little bit, and then quick to be heard. And I had to put the brakes on and learn how to talk. So that was a big thing.
A big experience. Well, I'm super impressed with what you've done. And even as we were talking backstage, there's so many topics I want to dive into, and really where this relates to where things are going, with this pandemic opening up so much awareness around these different topics. Real quick though, dive in or tell me a little bit about blockchain ethics. What does it mean?
Sure.
Yeah, why? Everything I hear about blockchain is that the benefit to blockchain is this secured link, right? Process that you have no, help me out. What words am I looking for? Explain blockchain.
Okay, explain blockchain. It's a distributed centralized ledger.
There you go. Ledger.
That's all it is. And from a technology perspective, what it enables is identity for the unidentified, banking for the unbanked or unbanking the banked, depending on what country you live in, and a voice for the voiceless. And the voice for the voiceless is where I come in.
Okay.
So, like, I talk to people who wouldn't be otherwise covered in the Wall Street Journal or the New York Times. I cover stories. Not only do I talk to founders, I talk to artists, and their stories are amazing. And one of the artists I most recently, not most recently, but a month and a half ago, I interviewed. Her name is Arabella. She has terminal cancer, and she uses hemp every day, legal marijuana every day, and she's not dead. And that's helped her to recover or be healthy right now, despite her death sentence from the doctors. Yeah. So it's amazing.
So talk to me about how blockchain plays a role. What are the ethics behind this that you talk about?
Sure. Well, my ethics are basically looking at, the last two books. The first book, Blockchain Ethics, was probably the only book that really covered the ICO days of 2017. Okay. So if you want to know what the history of blockchain was in 2017, you should read that book. Okay. The Bridge to Abundance one. The recent two, Arise from the Ashes, is when I relaunched the topic. I answered one simple question, and that question that was put in the media, they say NFTs are stupid. I said, are NFTs stupid? So I tell stories of art, for artists, life stories, and what they've been able to do and accomplish. And one of the artists, his name was Sir Darren Cullen. He started Graffiti Kings. He's a graffiti artist in the UK. All the street art you see in there in Philadelphia and all over, he was the original inspirer of that street art. Is it stupid? I definitely don't think so. And
Speaking of, this weekend I was in Nashville, and I rode scooters the other day chasing graffiti to take pictures of it. Like it's awesome. It's artwork.
Yeah. Yeah. And definitely not stupid. And then the last one was, fighting honorable battles. That Bitcoin's been pronounced dead in the media 450 times. Actually, probably more than that. And over the 14-year life. And guess what? It's not dead. And it's still not dead. And it's not going to be dead. And so those narratives out there are to scare investors, especially retail investors, from not investing in it, so the institutions can come in. And I'm like, you know what? Retail people should, and if you go back to my book, The Regeneration X, I talk about how not only was I laid off in 2017, people were people of our generation X generation were laid off, and not allowed back in the door, and that's not ethical, and the algorithms were set up that we couldn't get back in. And okay, Bitcoin is an opportunity. It's a way to recreate yourself and your career. And it might not be Bitcoin. It could be any other of the 13,000, cryptocurrencies or digital assets. All have ecosystems. All are built with, amazing teams and things. They're being used and are being adopted. Learn one or two or three, or a few, and then be able to use our skills and abilities, because we are able to look to sit beside or in between that analog and digital divide and make heads and tails out of both sides, and apply the technology and rebuild our careers. So that's, what I was getting with. And I proved that it's not dead. In fact, these are 16 of my podcast interviews. It shows what they're building using Bitcoin. So, I had to dispute that.
So talk to me about some of the stuff you've learned now, right? Like, for me, one of my favorite parts is the innovation and the people that are just so forward thinking with new ways to sequester carbon and do things better and do them right, more ethically, right? And so I'm curious from your perspective in this, blockchain and Bitcoin space, what is some of the real innovation that you've seen and most exciting, conversations you've been having?
That's a lot of them. As far as the carbon, there's a company that I interviewed, a founder that I interviewed last month.
Yeah.
He's going to be at Consensus when I'm going to be at that in June in Austin. And he's going to be presenting, at a booth or one of the, not the main stage, but one of the stages, what his company's doing. And they are doing, they're doing indexing of carbon credits. Mm-hmm. So that was really interesting from a carbon perspective, and then, I've interviewed people who have, associated with the UN, who are building village wallets in Africa, people who fled Ukraine. Last week I interviewed a woman, she fled Ukraine, and then I had her crying on the interview. I didn't mean to make her cry, but she said, "We Ukrainians are a fearless people," and I disagreed with her. She said, "What do you disagree about?" I was like, fearless is when you don't recognize that there's fear. Courage is when you recognize there's fear, acknowledge it, look at it straight in the eye and move forward powerfully anyway, and then she lost it. But, it was things like that from like my podcasts are not the typical podcasts are, what does your token do? What does your blockchain do? What does the price be? What does the market say? I don't really get into that. I get into, 15% about who you are, your background, 15% about what your company does. Okay, all of it. And then 70% high level important topics where I bring their thought leadership to the forefront.
Yeah.
And everybody who's starting a business on, or an artist, or you name it, has thought leadership buried down in there they haven't been able to communicate. And I extract that thought leadership and place it out there, and that helps them.
Okay, so talk to me about some of these leaders, right? What is some of the stuff you're hearing? And speak to me about Ukraine. You've interviewed a number of people from Ukraine. What are you hearing and seeing compared to what the news is projecting, or maybe what I'm hearing?
Yeah, so the news makes it sound like, this madman Putin attacked Ukraine out of nowhere, unprovoked, out of nowhere. He's a mad dictator. He's a madman. That's not the truth. He might be that. He might be those things. Okay, he's a general. He might be all those things, and I'm not going to dispute that. What I'm disputing is he attacked out of nowhere. Ukraine used to be part of the Soviet Union. Yeah. And there's still a group of people there, a faction of people, kind of like Trump supporters, and they're here, who are, who in Russia there, who think that the Soviet Union should still get back together. They believe that with all their core conviction, right? So the Ukrainians knew there was something coming, and they'd known it for 8 years. They were preparing for this war for 8 years. They knew they're going to be attacked someday. There's a lot of social cultural change in the country, and they were ready for it. The buildings got destroyed, but what they've built is they built a state and a smartphone, which is which I'm exploring for my next book because I had all these interviews. Where they are so technologically and digitally advanced that that has something to do with the money that we sent over there. That's something to do with the attack. Their telecommunication towers were down, but their internet was not. Their digital assets were not. And a lot of the exchanges that you see around the world in crypto were built by Ukraine or Ukrainians. So they are technologically savvy. That was never reported in the news. But the fact is that I talked to people who were under the rubble, where they in the basement bomb shelters, and people who fled the country, and other people who another founder, Pradeep, with Solve.care. He was in Florida. He flew to there and started building up shelters on the border of Poland. You just don't do that if you don't care. And it's really there's a lot that's there that people don't talk about. The media doesn't talk about. Tell us. So you have to dig under the hood.
Yeah. Okay, so when you did this, talk to me. You said that they're very intelligent, obviously, people. Talk to me about what is their role, or what's the role in Ukraine on the global market as far as digital currency or assets?
Oh, it's huge. A lot of the great developers are from there. Okay. Need them to move the ball forward. I mean, they have like a lot of the exchanges you wouldn't think of. They were built by Ukraine. And kind of like SQL shops are. A lot of the Indians are good with the SQL shops. The Ukrainians are great with this technology. So they were necessary. And then all the natural resources in that country. There's so many natural resources there. It's amazing. So it's a big, I think hub.
It's a big hub, you said?
Yeah, hub might be the wrong word, but it's important. And what else is important is these power structures like the U.S. and Russia are on the decline, right? And so other nations like Ukraine could also create a state and a smartphone, be a digitally independent and sovereign nation without needing to have that nuclear arsenal buildup that the old traditional power structures did. So you can have I wouldn't call it rogue, but you have a small nation be really advanced because they're building their economy digitally. That's important.
Okay, so talk to me about that. We talk about thought leadership and moving forward because it's such a different and new way of thinking, especially when you're looking at bridging, say, the U.S. government, right? And the way of currency and the way we transact. Talk to me about where you see things really moving and shifting and where that value add, who's leading the game.
Smaller countries like El Salvador, like Tonga, that recently had a earthquake. They said they're going to adopt digital currencies. South Korea, a lot of small nations, and Vietnam is one of the leaders, and so is Nigeria. And there's so much innovation happening in Africa. There's so many smaller nations that you don't think of on a global, economic scale that are adopted. Like we don't really need Bitcoin in the U.S., right? We don't really need it. We have. I mean, it's great for people who are marginalized, absolutely, 100%. But we don't need it like a lot of other nations need it that are living under tyranny. So you see that opportunity, and you see the people creating, digital economies where they can be self-sovereign or independent. That's a huge deal.
When this war happened, or when Russia attacked Ukraine or came into Ukraine, right? Mm-hmm. Where do you think the role, or what role was played in this digital asset or a digital currency and ability to move money quickly into the country? Right?
A lot of donations. A lot. FTX, some Everstake, some major exchanges help facilitate the money to help fight the war. Also, a lot of artists from the Ukraine created NFTs, And those NFTs, they were selling the NFTs to help fund, the war, to help fund their fight back in the war and give it to the army, and help build that. So I have a lot of pictures from the artists there who sent me what they've created as far as the NFTs and as far as the artwork they drew. Okay. So I have a couple that I bought. They were inexpensive as compared to the Bored Apes,
Yeah.
But that was to support them. There's a lot of great artists and a lot of great exchanges. A lot of have collected money and facilitated that internally. And in the past, you might have these entities that NGOs that might have collected money but not distributed where it was needed, and this money is going directly where it's needed. So that's important.
Yeah. Well, and it's traceable and trackable, right? Because now it's on a blockchain where we know exactly whose hands are touching it or where it's being distributed. And I think that becomes very powerful, especially for me as a donor, knowing, right? So much reservation or hesitation goes into putting money into these campaigns because how much actually goes to those that their house was blown up, or their farms that are being heavily affected. And shout out to all of our members and anybody that we know within the association and the industry over in Ukraine, or in the entire area, right, that is supporting the country, because we know a lot. And I've seen some crazy pictures come across my phone recently where farms are being attacked and equipment's being blown up, and the number of resources that are being used is, it's gut-wrenching. So it's interesting to me, the more that I've learned about this is really a tool that we have, that's accessible to quickly transact and move money to the needs, right?
And not just money, ownership,
okay,
rights, property rights, anything you think of, use it as a tool for that.
Okay. See, and this is stuff that the innovation part, right? We don't know what we don't know. And I do not dive into this enough. And so what I've learned in all of this in this last few months is I've really started to dive into data. It's not my strong suit. So I love having these conversations because I feel like I'm a sponge. I want to learn more.
Don't feel bad. Being able to make qualified business inferences using data is not something that, it's not being a kitchen analyst. It's a skill that you acquire over a decade at least, I did over 20 years. But you can't just come in the door. And that's a problem with one of the parts of the equity markets today. When we were laid off, another group of people walked in, the older group of people walked in the door and said, "Hey, data's new." And they were handed C-suite jobs, not being qualified to be there, and that wasn't new to me. In fact, it was the only corporate job I could get. A lot of times, you build the databases. You're not going to work in finance. You build databases. Okay. So I built databases, and then I couldn't get back in. And then you have people who no data experience being the chief data officer. That made no sense. And that weakened a lot of the tech and a lot of companies, it weakened them. The stock price was booming because the market was good. But when you peel back the hood, you look to see what's there, you're missing a lot of skill,
Yeah. Well, again, the data piece is, somebody said, and I've actually said this multiple times, what does the hemp industry need most to move forward? And a lot of people say processing or, genetics or seeds. And I say data. Right? We've got to be able to make better decisions about, and look what happened to the CBD industry. Mm-hmm. Right? It tanked and we had this huge overproduction. And I think had we had more data available or accessible, we could have made better business choices.
From the business perspective, yes, I 100% agree. From the perspective of retail consumers, it's more than that.
I agree.
And it's kind of the same thing as crypto. You need the media to not trash and bash the industry and need people to analyze and put things on a level playing field. And actually, that's been a big part of my investment mandate is navigating the news, in order to sift through, what's fact versus fiction. And, once you know what that is, then, and it's not easy, but I have a process to do it. I'm happy to tell you if you want to know. So what I do and what I've done for the past 4 years is I take an article. I mean, any article, there's a lot out there that I disagree with. Okay. I said, okay, that's just not right, And when I go through that article, I said, okay, what do I disagree about? A lot of times the underlying assumptions are faulty. It's supposed to be where you put information together, data together, and then you come up with a hypothesis and you back it up. A lot of the articles are, this is a data point, and this is my opinion. Well, guess what? Your opinion's off. Your opinion's wrong. You're not qualified to make that opinion a lot of times. What's your background? What are you talking about? I don't know. I don't draw the two together. So then I start researching the things I disagree with to try to find out why I disagree with them and if I'm wrong or not. That takes a little bit of time.
Sure.
As you do it more, you get used to it. And then find out things to support your point, right? And then, bridge that gap. Okay, how can I apply it in my life? This lesson in my life, and then think forward. How am I going to do that?
Okay, so speaking of this, right, and bridging this gap in the comment you just made of applying this to our lives, or applying, what's being presented as an opportunity for us to move real estate, move assets, move anything, right? More securely with better contracts. How does somebody like me get involved with the association? What's the benefit? How do we really take advantage and merge these two very forward-thinking industries?
It's really the same. Like blockchain is not new. Satoshi Nakamoto, when he created Bitcoin, he did not create any new tech. He used old tech, and he just put it together. He put blocks together with chains. Okay, hemp, the plant is not new. It's not new. It's old. It's old. There's time.
But you're right.
But the uses and the implementations of the innovations surrounding both are new and in many ways the same. So you're like, okay, I want to think of a concrete example. And at the moment I can't, but it's really this, like, how do I take this age old, thing, and how do I apply it to solve a world problem? For hemp, it's easy. I'll go back to my artist, I talked about earlier, medical marijuana, I actually have hemp almost every single day. I go to Clean Juice, which is down the street, which is a smoothie, and I add a protein, and I see what kind of protein. Hemp protein. So for me, it's helping me get healthy, Yeah. But the common person doesn't know that, needs to know it. Yeah. For blockchain, it's easy. Okay, the bank's going to pay you 0.25% in your savings account, and crypto is going to pay you a lot more than that. 7%. Would you rather have 0.25%, or would you have 7% on a stable coin? Oh, okay. Well, it's 28x. Oh, okay. When you put it that way, it's really simple, but it's not being put that way. And our job is to put things in a light that people can easily understand, and then they'll get it.
I need to take some of your classes. I'm going to listen to more of your podcasts. How do other people that are listening get in touch with you, and how do they find your podcast?
Well, right now, the podcasts are on the Irish Tech News. That there's going to be a format change coming in September. Okay. And I can't disclose that right now. Yeah. It's going to make some people angry. But when you're making a change, you have to I have a 6-step process when you're making a change, right? I have to recognize when I'm angry, and then also be grateful for the opportunities that I had, and I had opportunities to interview 184 amazing founders across the world. That's great. And then you come up with a plan, and you run that plan by a few trusted friends, and then you implement the plan to a T, and then they get angry. So there's gonna be a format change, but that format change is going to be good, because before I was in a lane of founders in crypto and blockchain. That was too narrow. And going forward, it's going to be people who've been maybe put on the sidelines by life. What's your story? How do you see getting out of it? Using these using blockchain or hemp or artificial intelligence or smart cities. So expanding the tech and also drawing back to more common person base where more people can identify and relate. So, that's going to be a change that I plan on putting in after I take the summer off because I'm exhausted right now.
That's so cool. Okay, you just said some things. I was literally just typing a question and to say, outside of the carbon trading that you mentioned earlier, or the medical, cannabis or high THC, and use of or distribution of, how else do you see blockchain in the industry? And then you said smart cities. What does that look like? Because I can't tell you how many people come to me and say, we want to build a smart city with hemp.
Wow.
It's
really?
a thing. Yeah, especially with the amount of carbon hemp sequesters and where it plays in a role there. Also in it, its life cycle analysis on durability or fiber quality, and being able to really redirect the supply chain and localize it for distribution. And then I go back to tracking anyways, I could go on and on about examples where I think now that I just unfolded some things, I think it could be used.
Okay. Well, one of the things that I did for my Regeneration X book, people would tell me I'm not a researcher. I researched all the findings that came out of the India Smart City project over the last decade.
Okay.
And I took my findings and I put it in the framework of the United Nations sustainable goals.
Yeah.
And I said, okay, this is what can be done. This is what could be done. Right now, I can't tell you what the contents is because I haven't looked at that section in a couple of years, but it's a good section. And there's a lot of like tangible things that I learned that that could be applied, and hemp does fit into those sustainable goals. So I have to revisit that, but I'm happy to have the conversation with you guys, about that because I do have that wealth of knowledge.
I'm going to send you when we get off of here. I just did an interview with a young lady last week week before last, about how hemp plays such a major role in the sustainability goals. Mm-hmm. And she basically went through and calculated what the impact is on each of them. And it's pretty impressive.
Wow. That'd be great.
I'd be curious too, how we could potentially collaborate after you're off of break to really help bring awareness around the sustainability side. Right? How do we create and do better for more people by incorporating smart technology and natural resources, instead of extracting?
Yeah, I'm more than happy to have those interviews. On the podcast. Like I said, I'm going to be branching out, and incorporating, new other technologies into my conversations. And that's going to be, really important. So yeah, I'm happy to do that. I wanted to do that. I just didn't didn't realize I was in such a tight, narrow niche that nothing else fit, but now, cause the core of my podcasts, like I said, are, not just talking about what's going on in the world, right? It's really, a mindset type interview. A lot of the people who are creative, I get that who are entirely left brained, I get them to start thinking right brain. People who are analytical, I start letting them think, creatively, and being able to move from the left and right brain is not an easy task. Somebody can't say, "Oh, I can do that." You can't without help, and you need somebody who's qualified to do it. And I was actually trained in 2017 by one of the top coaches in the world in Canada, who, she saw, I don't know what she calls her program now, full mind program. She taught me one little thing, and that's how to bridge that gap, how to move back and forth and toggle between those two, and use that as a strength. And I've mastered that over the past 5 years. So I help my guests. I don't tell them. They don't know what's happening. But when they at the end of the interview, they're like, "Oh, that was fun." I thought of things in a new way. Like, well, yeah, because I was helping guide you. But, I could definitely have this conversation. So if people are stuck in the idea of like, what else is there to do? What can I do? Well, I can help extract that, from your thoughts so that you can see what that is. And then you can start to imagine what's possible.
Okay, so I'm in. I'm all about learning what I don't know, and being in the industry that I am, there is so much innovation, right? And looking at how do we stay ahead of this, and knowing history about the plant and how it was banned and who got involved. It's important, I think, for me to be able to, or for the industry in general, to be able to have a group that can really get together and be forward thinking or look at these different perspectives. And so I'm interested, really coming from your angle and the involvement, because again, I think it comes back also to integrating traditional practices. And you kind of mentioned this in the beginning with these wars that you're seeing, right? Of especially agriculture, or I had multiple people say, hey, how do you think the USDA is really going to take, or what do you think their opinion is going to be of these grants that are being submitted around crypto and digital assets? And so I'm curious from your perspective to reference back to those wars you mentioned, as what are you seeing and how do we bridge that gap?
I just had how many people? A bunch of I've been to a bunch of funerals, in the past.
Sorry.
Past. And a lot of the impacts are people our age. You're not people who are older, but people our age. And I'm like, what's going on? What happened is we're the first generation to be impacted by both big pharma and big farming. So you have a lot of chemicals that are being used that were never used before. A lot of different processes that were not used 20 years before we came on the earth, right? They have been. We were the first ones to be subjected to this. So, and it has an impact. It causes shorter lifespan. So what can be done? Research. We've got to do research on what's happened. Because right now it's just an opinion, but that opinion is real when the friends that you grew up with as kids, who traded baseball cards with, pass away, and you hear about it that they died, and you're like, wow, so yeah, there's going to continue to be wars, and there's going to continue to be corporate interests that are involved, lobbyist interests that are involved, but there's a lot more that needs to be thought out, and a lot more that needs to be researched, and a lot more that needs to be educated. And I think we're just in the first inning.
Yeah. Okay, so what's your opinion on adoption, especially on I don't want to necessarily reference just the government, but these traditional ways of exchanging capital? Where do you really see that adoption, or what do you see that looking like as all of this scales and moves forward?
There's a new way to do things. Like I'll give you an example. My podcasts are all Web 2 right now, right? So I asked coaches to for advice on how to monetize, because I haven't made a dime, on what I've done. I haven't. If there's any money made, Irish Tech News takes it, or the guests get the benefit, or the PR firms tell them that there's a podcast fee, and I don't see that podcast fee. So my work is all, in the public and not my own. But for Web3, what I can do is I can create my own platform. And since I never got paid, I own all the content. I'm the content owner.
Yeah.
If you put something on YouTube, you're not the content owner because YouTube's paying you. But if you don't get paid for anything that you do, you're the owner. So I can create my own platform, and I can create, in a way that perhaps I can tie what I've done back to an NFT and then sell the podcast, as the owner of the podcast. So, that's one example of how you move from Web 2 to Web 3, taking ownership of what you've done, and the same can be in any area, like in finance. do I have to put my money into a bank and earn, 0.25%? Or can I buy crypto, stake my coins wherever I want to stake them, and earn a lot more? So it comes down to everything being in, being in control of, what you own and do, and really taking that ownership. So, do I want to own hemp stock, or do I want to be involved in investing into a farm? What's my choice? I have some choices here. So, so basically not being a victim of circumstance, but rather taking action and ownership for the future.
Okay, so you brought up a couple of things when you mentioned investment, right? What part do we want to put this into? I've had a couple of people talk about DAOs.
Okay.
Right? And utilizing this new way of exchanging assets as a way to generate revenue or capital to do good for the industry or for the globe or the nation or whatever, right? Can you talk a little bit about that and what you know and where you see those really playing in a role in the development of a new industry like hemp?
Yeah. Well, the DAO is decentralized autonomous organization where the governance is not up to a dozen boomers who are appointed by the friends.
Right.
It's up to all the community members who are participating and own tokens or whatever, own voting rights and voting shares. And that's much more democratized, So all they had to do was really find a cause, for creating an organization and for moving that organization forward. And I've seen some DAOs really work really well. Like, there's one called Padawan DAO, and what they do is they help each other attend conferences. And I couldn't attend a conference a couple of weeks ago, and I submitted, I gave them the ticket. So, and they distribute it. But I know Wyoming and I know Texas are two states that are really supporting the DAO structure, and Wyoming especially because it opens up new opportunities for businesses to be there. And, you don't have to be subjected to a centralized form of control. When a lot of the people who are older and in that control don't want to see innovation occur, so if you're younger or, want to see innovation happen, then you should be, in my view, really in favor of the DAO so you can be a participant in that whole ecosystem.
So I want to do this for the industrial industry, the industrial hemp industry. I just think that, and it's funny you say Wyoming. I'm from Wyoming. I just sent you a little message on your email with another name to connect you to also. Yeah, those are two areas, Wyoming and Utah, where I'm really passionate about building this industry and growing and really to hit those rural communities and desolate lands and opportunity zones and utilizing it, sequestering carbon from Wyoming or wherever is still sequestering carbon.
I definitely see you. You could definitely start a DAO, definitely. And people will join you. And when you put up the purpose of the DAO out there, people you don't even know and haven't even met will want to participate.
Well, and again, I think this goes back to that alternative way of transacting, right? That I feel like a lot of these traditional methods, especially in agriculture and even construction industry and some of these others, are almost stuck in their ways, right? And by opening up a DAO, it gives this opportunity for people who have done really well in digital currencies to be able to donate and make a difference and exchange without going through these other traditional methods. And so, yeah, I'm kind of curious. Do you have anything else you want to add there or anything else you want to point out?
You said that stuck in our ways, right?
Yeah.
We are stuck in our ways because of the lobby industry in the country.
Yes.
Very powerful lobby industry. You even saw it, 2 days ago with that, unfortunate with the massacre, and I'm in Connecticut where they had, another massacre a dozen years ago. And we've had 200 or more so far. And there's the event, and there's a public outcry, and then there's talk about guns being reformed, and then lobbyists get involved, and there's like, oh, we're not going to do anything. Oh, and then you have another one, so we're stuck in our ways because of structures that exist right now that should probably be rethought. Yeah. And they impacted every industry. And I was in the insurance industry, for years. And what they did in the insurance industry is they commoditized it. They made it all about price. And the insurance contracts are still from 1977, and there's been no change. And there's been horrible change to the airline industry, and all the things that you see there. And it's everything's made about price and commoditized. And it didn't used to be like that.
Right.
It used to be a difference. There used to be impact. There used to be, social ethics around things, and there's not anymore. So I think we need to put them back in.
And you think that blockchain or this system has a better method of giving, let me rephrase that. What I hear often is the traceability and the accessibility to the information, I guess, makes it, the transparency, right, makes it more appealing. It's what gives that security back. It's what gives me as a consumer the security to know, what are my dollars going? What am I buying? Who am I supporting? What's the company's truth, right? Because there's been so much garbage spewed everywhere about, and especially around greenwashing, for example, or ethically sourced or US made. I hear over and over again, well, it says US, but it was really made in Mexico. It was really sown somewhere else. And so
it's almost the US.
Yeah. Isn't that interesting? Okay, so any highlights? Who out there is really doing it right? And if I want to get involved, what is a good step for me to first take? Is it an investment in coin? Is it, setting up an NFT to all of these digital assets that I have on, of interviews and platform? You know what I mean? Like, where do we start in getting more involved and really converting to this digital asset?
Okay. I'm going to answer that in two parts. The first part is all the technical stuff you said about blockchain is right. What's missing, what people are doing, what's working that people are doing right is an eye of altruism. Like Charlie Lee, the founder of Litecoin, he built Litecoin from an altruistic perspective. Altruism is very, very, very important and not one of the things I looked at. But when you add altruism to the technology, then you're like, okay, I understand it now. Now, I am starting to work with some friends on the side, who ask me for help. And I don't tell them, oh, you should buy X coin or you should do, because if you don't have a conviction for that coin, you are going to sell. And the market turns bad and the price goes down, like, oh, well, that didn't work out for me. Very easily, but if you develop a conviction on what this could be used for and how you see yourself fitting into that ecosystem for the future, then you're never going to sell, And I have 15 coins and I'm committed to, helping the ecosystems on each of them, do well. So, and they are actually stuff that I did in my career. Like one's a middleware coin. I built middleware. I understand it. If you buy things that you don't understand, you're not going to keep it. You're like, it's going to fall by the wayside because of, what's that word? Alchemy, So that's one. But my friends, I don't tell them buy X coin. I say, read the Satoshi Nakamoto Bitcoin white paper first. You will not understand it. You will not understand it the first time or the second time or the third time you read it. But by time 30, you might start to get it. Okay.
You'll pick up on some of the words. This is what you do next. I tell them to read William Mulgier's The Business Blockchain. Okay.
Or listen to it. I tell them to read A Bitcoin Revolution by Don Tapscott. And I've interviewed both Don Tapscott and Alex Tapscott. And I tell them to read some other books. And I tell them to check out some websites like Chainlink Ecosystem and look at all the partnerships. And then there's like 1,000 partnerships. Learn what all the partnerships do. This is before you put any money into it. I want you to learn what you're buying before you buy it, because if you don't, then you're not going to stay.
Right.
So I want to train you for the future. And once you know how to fish, then you're on your own.
I love it.
But I can help them learn how to fish.
Okay. Well, I want to learn. I actually am very interested in the digital asset piece for our media that we produce, right? And being able to, or the event attendees, or the number of times things are rewatched, or subscription model. I'm curious about how does that work and how can we do that so that we maintain ownership of it.
Yeah, we can talk offline.
Cool.
So,
Yeah, very cool. Well, we're about out of time. And so I want to give a shout out to everything you're doing. I'm really excited about this. I'm really excited about giving security even back to our farmers. I mean, my list could go on the digital side, because I really realize more and more that it's the future. Like it is what we have to be able to pivot, and we have to be able to look at this from a different angle. And kudos to you that's been so much further ahead. And really, I feel like I've been a stick in the mud, not because I'm not interested. It's that it is so foreign to me. And my mind does not think in this way. And so I shouldn't say it doesn't. It needs more practice. I need to exercise it.
As you do more practice,
yes,
you will have a paradigm shift.
Yeah.
You might have multiple paradigm shifts. And then you say, oh, like
totally.
I interviewed Craig Wright. Not Craig Wright. I interviewed his top student. I want to interview Craig Wright. I interviewed his top student from the dojo, Satoshi Dojo. And he was telling me all about, BSV, which is, Bitcoin Satoshi Vision. But everybody thinks that Craig Wright is a fraud. He's a fake Satoshi or whatever. But the stuff that they were telling me, like, it goes contrary to everything that I've understood about Bitcoin Core. And I'm like, it's kind of like took that stuck brain, like, pulled it apart. So, and that was a paradigm shift to see, okay, this is how they're doing it. This is how, what I know. And sometimes that.
Okay, well, let's get into this. I would love to get into this more. I want to bring this, I think that it's going to help a lot in bridging this gap in security for our farm, right? For our inputs.
Yeah.
So, you add that piece on top of the exchange of revenue or, loans. Our industry is so broken at moving capital back and forth. And so this is another great way at getting away from traditional lending and traditional banking and being able to find investment so much faster.
I want to add one thing.
Yeah, please.
I've interviewed a number of metaverse founders around the world, right? And metaverse here, if you go to Silicon Valley, it's hype. It's all hype. It's 100% hype. Metaverse, metaverse this, metaverse that. But when you talk to the people who are actually building the metaverse, the number one thing that they have to work, the number two things that they work on is identity and security. Security is a big deal, but there are a lot of lessons, I think, that the security, when building security-wise in the metaverse, can be applied to farmers.
100%. I think that, well, and again, just look at just the carbon tracking, right? I think that those are, there's so many pieces that you look at water rights, you look at mineral rights, you look at, and this goes back to land ownership and deed transfers and
identity and security. Big two things.
Yes. Okay. Well, thank you very, very much for your time today. I would love to do this again. Please keep me in the loop with all of your fun activities this summer. I'm excited for your break and get to take some time off, but I'll send you over a calendar link also. And when you have time, no rush, I would love to really kind of outline what opportunities GHA has to really move forward on the data and the contracts and NFTs and multiple pieces.
Sounds great. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you very, very much for coming, and thanks everybody for joining today. If you have any questions, like I said, don't hesitate to holler. Real quick, tell them again, how do we contact you? What do you look at? How do people find you?
You can contact me at jamil@jamilhasan.com via email, and then my podcasts are all on Facebook. It's a Crypto Hipster Talks Regeneration X and Blockchain. It's a Crypto Hipster JH at the Facebook is the page. So you can do that. Or you can go to the Anchor FM and look for Irish Tech News and then try to sift through which ones are mine.
Huh, you're awesome. Can you search on there probably?
Probably.
Search my name on there. Okay, well, cool. I'm excited to hear where it's going next and transferring to next so that we can all join in and watch. And then I'll be sure to share it through my channel as well. But thank you very, very much. We'll see everybody.
Thank you.
See you later, sir.